unpacking today's headlines. This is Souls and Liberty in Depth.
Hello everyone and welcome to In Depth, the production of Souls and Liberty. Kamala versus Trump, DEI versus MAGA. What are the first round of polls showing as of today? Well, joining us today to talk about all this is Jim Ellis from EllisInsight.com, longtime political guru. He's joining us from Washington, D.C. Hello, Jim. How are you?
Great, Michael. Good to see you.
Thanks. It's good to see you, too. I've seen you a few times this week. And Stephen Wynn, fellow Souls and contributor, coming to us from Kansas City. Hello, Stephen.
Hello. Good to see you.
All right, here we go. I'm your host, Gary Michael Voris. All right, man, let's kick it off with you, Jim, first. What do the polls show? I've had a few days here for them to begin to settle in and start to show something. What do we see?
Well, they haven't changed that much. And that's been really the case for quite a while, where Trump has a slight lead in most of these places, the key battleground states. You can interchange Biden and Harris, and the numbers really don't move too much. So he is still looking pretty strong. There's a lot of media reports, that she's getting a bump and all this stuff. But when you look at the actual numbers, it's only been in one poll nationally, and that was the Ipsos Reuters poll. Had Harris up by 4 points, but the others that were taken at exactly the same time had Trump ahead. So we're going to see this type of pattern for quite a while. And as Tony Fabrizio, Trump's pollster, came out with released a letter saying, here's what's going to happen on the polling. The media is doing everything they can, and the Democrats, to bump Harris up, and we're going into the Democratic convention. There's no question that she will get a bump, and then it's going to normalize after that and probably get back to where we are now as we hit the critical time. So definitely expect a bump for Harris, but frankly, we haven't seen it that much yet.
There was polling going on, random sort of, hey, if it were Harris before Biden pulled out, those numbers are kind of consistent then all across the board, right?
Yes, and her favorability is still not very good. It's always been very close to where Biden's was. And so therefore, the fundamental situation here is she is a weak candidate. And they're going to try to make her something she's not. And unless she improves a great deal, I don't see how the fundamental aspects of this campaign has changed all that much. I mean, they can certainly talk about the same issues that they did when they were talking about Biden, and in fact, to a greater degree on the border, because she was, quote, the border czar. Now, it's fun to see them trying to claim, that title was just made up, and Biden never really put her in charge of the border. But now there's his actual letter out today at the time showing that putting her in charge of the border. So once again, it's sleight of hand. What you're seeing but with your eyes is not real. That's always their message, but it is. And it's going to be a major part of this campaign.
Of course, she was the border czar. If she's the border czar for 2.5 years, if she wasn't, why didn't CNN tell us 2.5 years ago she's not the border czar? Stephen, let's switch over to you here real quickly. Do those numbers that Jim just went over sort of surprise you at all? I mean, wouldn't we be thinking maybe, hey, they've pulled a switcheroo here, and, the defenders of democracy undemocratically drove out their undemocratically elected leader, and yet nothing seems to have really changed that much. Is that a surprise to you, or given her weakness, as Jim points out, kind of what would you actually expect to change? What are your thoughts?
I am pleasantly surprised, actually. I don't know, maybe I'm a bit of a pessimist here, but my fear was that she would start to accelerate considerably in the polls. So what Jim is saying is actually, I find reassuring, but he's right. I think the key is the narrative here. Trump has got to make sure that moving forward, his story, his message is constantly out in the public square, because the same Marxist media establishment that has cocooned Biden for the past 3.5 years, they're already crafting a new narrative, for Kamala, trying to shield her. They want to build a new picture of her unburdened by what has been, so to speak.
Very well put. Very well put. Jim, let's switch back to you now for a second. If there were one single primary indicator as the race unfolds, like the single thing that we should be looking at to kind of get read the tea leaves, like what's going to happen on November 5th, provided everything were, all things being equal, which we know they probably won't be, what would you tell people, here's what we want to look out for?
Well, the maps have changed, and we see a different map than we had in the past. And this is very positive from the Trump standpoint. One of their goals was to expand the playing field, meaning put more states in play. And it looks like they've done that according to the latest polling in some strange states. If you look at the maps, always the key to a Trump victory versus Biden. And remember, Biden only has to get, and now Harris, 90% of the electoral votes they did last time. So the maps still make it easier for Harris to win because she has to get less. And the key was that Trump had to convert 35 electoral votes from states that voted for Biden in 2020. And it always appeared that it was going to go through the Great Lakes. And this type of a map where he had to win Georgia and then any one of those Great Lakes states, either Pennsylvania, Michigan, or Wisconsin, that appeared to be locked in. And it's not the case anymore. So if you look at, and it's not the case because of these three states right here you see on these maps, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. And the numbers there indicate the electoral votes that each of those states possess. So far, we have seen 64 polls in these three states from 15 different pollsters since January 1st of this year. Trump has been ahead in all of them, except one in Nevada, which was high. And if you look at the maps, they're saying, oh, these are toss-up states. They're really 64 polls from 15 different pollsters give Trump relatively substantial leads in all three of these states. And now these become the most important states on the board. Because if you add up the electoral votes here, 16 in Georgia, 11 in Arizona, and 6 in Nevada, that equals 33. That means he needs only one more state anywhere to win the election. And therefore, we see these other states now, as I mentioned, coming into play. And by what I mean in play is we've seen polling data here within the last month. Now, some of these states don't get polled very often, that Trump is either up or down by a percentage point. Now, these are solid Democratic states normally. Minnesota is the most solid state for the Democrats in the presidential race. The last time Minnesota voted for a Republican was in 1972 for Richard Nixon. Every state in this country has voted for a Republican for president at least one time since then. But yet Trump is down one in some polls and up one in others in Minnesota. So that's an important point. Virginia, between 1 and 3 points down. That's a solid state for the Democrats now. New Jersey, one of their most solid states. Now, Republicans tend to poll a lot better in New Jersey than they do. So this one might be fool's gold, but Trump in the last poll was up by 1 point in New Jersey. And Maine, there's a good chance he wins a plurality vote. Now, they have that ranked choice system, which probably allows Harris to win, but he could pick up 2 votes there. But the key two are, as we see here on these maps, as we continue to move forward, this is where he could win the race. And as you notice, there's no Great Lakes states here. There's no Pennsylvania. There's no Michigan. There's no Wisconsin, which are tough states for both sides, actually.
Well, let me ask you this before you go on, Jim. Let me interrupt you. It doesn't even seem conceivable that he could win New Hampshire or New Mexico and not win the Great Lakes states also, the Rust Belt states as they're commonly referred to. I mean, that if he starts to win these states, I mean, he won those 3 states in 2016. So yeah, and then Biden
yes, that's true.
won. I'll put that in quotes, won them back. But If he wins New Mexico and New Hampshire, I think at some point you're saying, well, how could he possibly lose any of this? In other words, if he wins those two, this looks like a landslide.
Possibly so. However, he doesn't even have to win both of these.
Right.
So remember, 35 is the key number. So if he took, and Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada add up to 33, add New Mexico's 5 by itself, puts him over the top. Add even New Hampshire's 4 votes, puts him over the top. So that's the key here. There are other ways for Trump to win than the traditional Georgia and then one of the Great Lakes states. So I think that's where we see some very significant changes in this campaign and the emphasis on different states now. And Harris will be able to get most of these states back, but they're going to have to spend money and they're going to have to spend time. They are no longer slam dunks, and Trump now has more options and avenues to win this race. So the maps are definitely trending in Trump's favor.
All right, Jim. Well, of course, first of all, thanks for those maps. They make things very easy. Tell it with a picture. That's always a good aid. The Democrats are, of course, aware of all of that. So far, she's made a number of speeches, and they all seem, I don't know, they don't seem like convinced the man in the middle, the independents sort of thing that are really the deciders of those states to vote for her. And plus this whole, everybody's known her as the border czar. People got to hear, oh no, she wasn't the border czar, and just say, what are you talking about? Of course, there's this constant confusion, constant like, what? For the normal, reasonable person sitting in the middle of all of this.
Well, definitely. And the fact that they are trying to cover up now, was in fact in charge of the border, that Biden put her in charge of that, shows you how vulnerable they are on that issue and how damaging the border issue is to their campaign.
It's funny, we never hear, and we can have you ring in on this also, Stephen, but we never seem to hear anything about the border when it comes to New Mexico. There's always Arizona, obviously California, Texas, largest border with Mexico, largest border period. But nobody ever seems to talk about New Mexico. Isn't there all kind of like drug smuggling and child sex trafficking and all of that stuff going on there as well? It seems to me like New Mexico should be low-hanging fruit for the Republicans.
Right. Yes. Yeah. The border is just as porous there in New Mexico as it is in Arizona and Texas. So I agree. It's interesting. This is something that I think we should also focus on is just the role that Catholics are going to play this fall. I think Catholics are going to be pivotal in determining the fate of the United States on November 5th. New Mexico is one of the 10 most Catholic states. Out of the 10, 7 are just unquestionably Democratic, bastions of the blue. And the remaining 2 are states that we've been talking about today, New Mexico and New Hampshire. And it's crucial that Catholics in those states vote right, and I mean capital R, to reinforce church teaching and basically to try to rescue the nation from Biden's policies on issues like the sanctity of life, the sanctity of marriage, and so forth. In New Mexico, its population, I was doing a little background reading on just the Catholic vote in the United States at the state level. 30% of New Mexico's population is Catholic. Of that, 33% attend Mass weekly. In New Hampshire, 31% are Catholic and just 18% attend weekly Mass. So what does that tell you? To me, it says to me that Catholics in those states, as in every state, sadly, aren't taking their faith as seriously as they need to. As a result, a lot of them may be heading to the polls on November 5th politically uninformed or misinformed and with their consciences malformed, really. And I think the bishops are not helping this at all. Just prior to Biden stepping down, the USCCB issued their Catholic voter guide, and it is unabashedly pro-Biden. It lists 47 categories, 47 issues that are ostensibly issues of concern for Catholics. And according to the U.S. bishops now, Biden's policies align with the Catholic position on 38 issues. They do not align on 7 issues, including that pesky little matter of child murder. Trump, on the other hand, his policies align with, supposedly the Catholic position on just 11 issues and do not align on 20 issues. So, even well-meaning, good-intentioned Catholics who might think, okay, I need to vote morally, if they consult the voter guide, I can't say that they're going to be guided too well, I would say.
Yeah, we of course know that whole disaster of the voter's guide and all that, and the seamless garment garbage goes all the way back to Cardinal Joseph Bernardine in the 80s in Chicago, and the whole point of that is to present as many issues as possible so that you swamp the issue, for example, of abortion. It's just one among 47. What they never delineate is, let's separate out these 5, 6, whatever it is, absolutely non-negotiable. These are a hierarchical issue. You cannot vote for a candidate who supports these things. And then if it comes down to, well, you both sort of support, one wildly extreme and the other one not quite as bad. Well, even John Paul, St. John Paul said, well, then you got to make a prudential decision and choose for the lesser of the evil. And I think part of the problem in the Catholic vote, which is a big deal, is that within the ones you would think would be, hey, okay, let's vote correctly here, there are these purists who stand there denying the pragmatic situation and say, oh, well, I'm not going to vote for anybody who's not absolutely perfect. And then just say, well, I'm just not going to vote. Well, that's a vote for, let's vote for Biden, or in this case, Harris. That's been a real problem. We're going to be talking, later on with some folks who are telling us that roughly half of the Catholics don't vote. They just don't show up. 50% just don't show up. Some aren't even registered to vote. I'm like, where did you get that from? That's okay. But Stephen, let me come back to you on this question. Help put all of this in perspective for us for the election itself. As a nation, where are we right now? We saw the destruction yesterday in Washington, D.C. by the pro-Palestinian crowd and, defacing monuments and burning the American flag and hoisting up the Palestinian flag. It's one thing to burn a flag. It's another thing to hoist up another flag in place of the American flag. But, that's kind of Kamala's America. So, you're a big observer of all this and commenter. What do you make of the condition of the nation right now?
I think we're at our most critical juncture in our history, and I think it's quite appropriate that basically the Biden-Harris administration has been bookended by these kinds of displays, these outright riots. Basically, the George Floyd, Black Lives Matter garbage that basically helped usher in this administration, and now it's occurring again. On the pro-Palestinian disturbances at the opposite end of it, and I just think if we see more of that, we will see more of that if we see another Democratic administration. If Harris gets in, I think America is over. I really do. Things have been building for years, decades, even the infiltration of sort of stealth communism into American institutions, the university in particular, has just dramatically undermined the health of the nation. But it has just exploded over the past 3.5 years. And if it continues at this pace, I think America as we know it and love it will be gone.
Yeah, some people say it's on life support right now. Jim, let's switch gears for a moment. Everybody's talking about the top of the ticket. The U.S. Senate races seem to be kind of a different story. What are those numbers showing there?
Those numbers are troubling for Republicans because where you look at the critical states in the West Virginia will flip to the Republicans. So the majority in the Senate right now is 51 to 49 in favor of the Democrats, but the electoral majority, because of Wisconsin now coming, of West Virginia coming over to the Republicans, and there's no doubt that as Governor Jim Justice wins that and converts that state for the Republicans, that makes it 50-50. So of all the remaining Senate races there, they only need one more to get an absolute majority of 51. But the next two maps in 2026 and 2028, and remember, senators have 6-year terms, and a third of the Senate comes up every 2 years. The next two maps favor the Democrats, whereas this one favors the Republicans. And so they have to maximize their gains this time. And that means not getting to one seat, that means getting to 53 or 54. And that's becoming more problematic. You see races in Ohio, in Nevada, Arizona, Montana, these types of campaigns where Trump is ahead in all of these states, yet the Senate candidate for the Republicans is lagging considerably behind. Now, one state I think they do win in Montana, you've got Trump ahead by almost or at 20 points, yet the Republican Senate nominee now is just barely ahead. So the drop off there is 15 to 18 points, yet they still may win. So the key for the Republicans, and we're seeing that in these other places as well, as I mentioned, they've got to bridge the gap and convince a potential Trump voter, a person that's going to vote for Trump, that they need to move down and vote Republican on the Senate races as well. And if from a Republican perspective, that's what they need to do, and that does not appear to be happening right now.
It's just baffling. It's baffling that you would have a voter go in the booth and go, okay, either, what's in their mindset? Either I like Trump, yay, pull the lever. But I prefer that Democratic senator. Or option B, you got a guy going in there who's like, oh boy, I just can't really stand, I hate Trump, I can't stand him, but what Biden / Harris have done is even worse. I'm going to hold my nose and vote for him. But then I'm going to go vote for a Democratic, lawmaker who supports the very reason that I had the split personality on the Democrat-Republican top of the ticket vote. It just doesn't make sense.
And part of it is that most of these Democratic candidates are incumbents and have won several races. Sherrod Brown in Ohio is a really good example. And Trump won in Ohio twice by 9 percentage points. He's up in the polls right now, 8 to 10. But yet, Brown consistently has a 5-point lead over Republican Bernie Moreno. And why is this happening? Well, let's look at the type of campaign that Brown is running. First of all, the Democrats have a huge money advantage in the Senate races, and they are using it. So if you look at Brown's campaign, and I think it's from his standpoint, from a strategy standpoint, he's right on the money because it's all about Ohio. Everything he's done for Ohio manufacturing, Ohio that. He never mentions the presidential race, never mentions Washington, D.C. It's all about what he does for Ohio. I think that's a smart move for him, and Moreno needs to figure a way to overcome that. But that's just an example, and watch these campaigns. You've got the races in Montana and in Nevada, where the Democrat incumbent, John Tester in Montana, Jackie Rosen in Nevada, they have a huge money advantage. They're using it now. And their message is very similar to the two of them. Oh, they're independent all of a sudden, and they stand up to their party, and they're tough on the border. And now, when each of them did that is a mystery to me, but that's what they're selling. And it's working. It's definitely working in Nevada, not so much in Montana, because you got to figure again, if Trump wins Trump wins Montana, by 18 to 20 points, that's awful tough for Democratic Senator Tester to overcome. And you look at Maryland, Larry Hogan running there for the Republicans, he's got the same problem that Tester does, because Harris now will win Maryland probably by 30 points. And that's just really difficult for a member of the other party when you have such a turnout model to overcome. And so we're seeing that. But right now, Gary, I think the Republicans get to 51. They really need 53 or 54. And where do those other seats come from? That's the big unanswered question.
Yeah, well, we'll see how that goes. All right, Jess, we're going to leave it there. Thanks for coming on. We're going to see you again real soon right here on In Depth. Before we leave you all at home, though, just a little thought. A few weeks before the Bolsheviks, the Marxist, atheist communists, staged their revolution in Russia in 1917, on the opposite end of the continent, the Mother of God, the Queen of Heaven, appeared to 3 peasant children and warned the world about what was about to happen in Russia. The location of her appearance was Fatima, Portugal, and it was and remains the only time in 2,000 years of Christian history that heaven has warned about a particular form of government. And as we know, there have been some pretty horribly wicked governments throughout human history. She said Russia would spread her errors throughout the world. Well, that's proved to be right. Communism, which is what the Democratic Party has been taken over by, denies the very essence and nature of man as being made in the image and likeness of God. They declare that our rights come from them, not God. That the state is the ultimate arbiter over life and death because, and this is the point, there is no God. While the election presents itself as MAGA versus DEI, and while that's true, that's actually a proxy war between truth and lies, ultimately between heaven and hell. That government is so evil that the Lord of heaven and earth sent his mother to warn us about it. All Christians, but Catholics in particular, better heed that warning because the time is almost over. And perhaps all of this is directly related to heaven intervening in that assassination attempt. That's it for today. Until tomorrow, God love you. I'm Gary Michael Boris.